The alarms on port Helios 9 did not scream. They chimed. Soft, polite tones rolled through the cargo concourse, the kind designed to prevent panic. Dockworkers looked up in confusion as the lights dimmed by a careful 10%. Security drones paused mid-patrol, their optics flickering as if distracted. Mara Hale noticed the silence first. She had been balancing a crate of medical polymers onto a mag sled when the hum of the station shifted, dropping half a register. Her hands stilled. Around her, people kept moving, kept talking, kept laughing. The chiming continued, measured, almost apologetic. "Is that a drill?" someone asked behind her. No one answered. The air fractured. Not exploded, peeled. Space itself folded inward near Bay 12, revealing a black-edged wound that spat armored figures onto the deck. They moved fast. Too fast. No shouting. No wasted motion. Blue-white stun bolts stitched through the crowd with clinical precision. People fell where they stood, muscles locking, eyes wide. Mara dropped the crate and ran. She made it 3 steps before gravity betrayed her. A field snapped around her ankles, yanking her sideways. She hit the deck hard, breath bursting from her lungs. Cold metal pressed between her shoulder blades as a boot pinned her down. "Human. Female. Unaugmented." A voice rasped above her, filtered and inhuman. "Viable." She did not scream. She turned her head just enough to see the slaver who had caught her. Tall, jointed wrong, armored plates etched with tally marks. His weapon hummed inches from her face. "Please!" someone sobbed nearby. The slaver ignored them. He tapped a control on his gauntlet. The field tightened, lifting Mara off the floor like an object being shelved. Her wrists burned as restraints closed. "Move!" he said, already turning away. Around her, the concourse had become a still life of terror. Bodies lay frozen mid-stride. A man clutched his child, both rigid as statues. Emergency shutters began to descend too late, severed by precise plasma cuts. Mara forced herself to breathe slowly. She watched everything. They marched the captives through a temporary gate punched straight into vacuum, into the belly of the ship lurking beyond the station's blind spot. The Carthax chain was vast, angular, and ugly, built for function, not comfort. Gravity snapped on the moment they crossed the threshold. Someone vomited. Someone else prayed. Mara kept walking. Processing took less than 5 minutes. Clothing was removed and discarded without ceremony. Personal effects vanished into bins. Skin was scanned, teeth catalogued, muscle density measured. Each captive was assigned a designation that replaced their name on the overhead display. Mara's turn came. She stood naked on the platform, spine straight, eyes level. The scanner arms whirred around her, cool light mapping every centimeter. A slaver clerk hunched over a console, his 4 fingers dancing across translucent keys. "Name," he said, not looking up. "Mara Hale," she replied. The clerk paused. It was a small thing. Barely a second. But Mara saw the tension ripple through his shoulders. The console emitted a faint tone, low, dissonant. "What?" Overseer Exorthale demanded from behind him. Exorthale was massive even by slaver standards, his armor layered thick, his cranial ridges scarred and polished smooth by age. He radiated authority the way some stars radiated heat. "Minor delay, Overseer," the clerk said quickly. "Registry synchronization lag." Exorthale loomed closer, peering at the display. "We're not in Union space. The registry works when I say it works." "Yes, Overseer." The clerk's fingers trembled as he forced the entry through. The tone stopped. The screen cleared. Mara was lifted off the platform and shoved toward the holding pens. As she passed Exorthale, he studied her with mild curiosity, like a craftsman assessing flawed material. "You're quiet," he said. "Most humans aren't." Mara met his gaze. "Noise doesn't change outcomes." A few nearby slavers clicked in amusement. Exorthale's lips peeled back, revealing rows of sharp, uneven teeth. "We'll see." The holding pen smelled of metal and fear. Energy bars sealed the captives inside, casting pale light across hunched forms. Some cried. Some stared blankly. One man beat his fists against the barrier until his knuckles split. Mara sat against the far wall and waited. Time passed oddly on the Carthax chain. Lights never fully dimmed. The air vibrated with distant machinery. At intervals, slavers walked by, selecting captives for inspection, their gaze calculating. Two stopped outside Mara's pen. That one said, gesturing with his chin. She didn't react during intake. So? The other replied. Humans vary. The first hesitated. The name entry flagged. Everything flags if you stare at the system long enough. Mara closed her eyes, listening. They moved on. Hours later, maybe more, the ship shuddered, a subtle tremor that ran through the deck. Conversations faltered. Somewhere deep within the hull, a tone sounded. Not an alarm. More like a correction. Mara felt it in her bones. A slaver guard passed her pen, muttering into his calm. Navigation just auto-adjusted. I didn't authorize. Static swallowed the rest. Mara opened her eyes and looked up at the ceiling, at the unseen layers of metal and vacuum beyond. She thought of her father's voice, calm and firm, repeating the lesson she'd heard since childhood. Never threaten. Never explain unless asked. Names are not weapons. They are signals. Across the pen, a woman whispered, "What's happening?" Mara didn't answer. On a console 2 decks above, her name sat embedded in the system logs, unremarkable at a glance, yet marked by invisible parameters older than the ship itself. And far away, in a place the slavers had never bothered to fear, something had noticed. The Carthax chain did not drift. It corrected. That was the first thing Overseer Exorthale noticed when he returned to the command deck. The stars outside the forward viewport had shifted by a fraction, barely perceptible, but wrong. His ship obeyed orders, not suggestions. Who adjusted our vector? He demanded. No one answered immediately. The navigation officer, a thin-scaled Krivak with data ports lining his skull, stared at his console as if it had betrayed him. No manual input registered, Overseer. The course alteration originated internally. Exorthale's mandibles flared. Define internally. The Krivak swallowed. Automated correction. Priority override. That system hasn't been active since. A weapons officer stopped himself, glancing around. Since before we acquired this vessel. Exorthale finished coldly. Run diagnostics. I want to know what thinks it outranks me. Throughout the ship, similar disturbances rippled outward. Cargo bay lights flickered. Environmental regulators recalibrated without prompt. Slave inventory updates stalled at 99%, refusing to finalize. In the holding sector, Mara felt the shift as a subtle pressure behind her eyes. The deck vibrated differently now, like a distant pulse had synchronized with the ship's spine. A slaver guard cursed as his datapad froze mid-scroll. Again? He snapped, smacking the screen. This thing's been lagging all cycle. Another guard leaned closer, lowering his voice. Ever since the human intake. Don't start. I'm serious. The registry flagged something. Redacted fields. Mara kept her gaze lowered, counting breaths. Later they took her. The restraints were tighter this time. No casual shoves, no mocking commentary. 2 guards escorted her through corridors she hadn't seen before, cleaner, brighter, closer to the core. The walls hummed with energy. She was seated across from Overseer Exorthale in an interrogation chamber shaped like a blade. No instruments were visible, but she could feel the field generators thrumming beneath the floor. Exorthale studied her in silence. You are causing inefficiencies, he said at last. I'm sitting, Mara replied. One of the guards snorted. Exorthale silenced him with a glance. Our systems disagree, the Overseer continued. Your entry triggered restricted protocols. Mara met his eyes. Did it? Human evasion tactics are well documented, Exorthale said. False names. Corrupted data. You will correct the record. She shook her head once. The record is correct. Exorthale leaned forward. Then explain the anomaly. You already know the answer, she said calmly. You just don't like it. Silence stretched. Pain will loosen your tongue, he said. The field surged. It wasn't the sharp agony she'd expected. It was pressure, compressive, designed to overwhelm nerves without visible damage. Her vision blurred at the edges. She breathed through it. Exorthale watched closely. After several seconds, his mandibles twitched, not satisfaction, but irritation. Enough, he snapped. The field dropped. Mara exhaled slowly. You're trained, he said. Not military. Not augmented. Yet you endure. I was taught, she answered. By whom? She hesitated just long enough to be deliberate. My family. The word rippled through the room. One of the guards shifted his weight. Exorthale waved them away. Return her to holding. Increase observation. As they dragged her out, she heard him bark orders into a calm. I want full access to the registry logs. Every layer. If Union encryption is involved, strip it. Yes, Overseer, came the strained reply. But some segments are locked. Nothing is locked to me. In the lower decks, unease spread like a contaminant. A maintenance crew found an access hatch sealed shut by an override code that didn't exist in their database. Communications lagged by half-seconds, enough to disrupt coordination. The jump drive's readiness indicator flickered between green and amber without explanation. In the holding pen, a gaunt man whispered, They're scared. Mara didn't correct him. Fear was too simple a word. A junior slaver, barely old enough to have earned his armor markings, approached her barrier later, glancing over his shoulder. What's your name again? He asked. Mara Hale. He swallowed. The system keeps rerouting when I try to pull your file. Then stop pulling it, she said gently. Why? He pressed. What are you? She looked at him then, really looked. Someone you should have let go. He recoiled as if struck and hurried away. On the command deck, Exorthale finally tore through enough security layers to expose the problem. The registry display filled with data, most of it redacted, black bars obscuring entire sections. At the center sat the name. Hale Mara. Status, civilian. Notice, conditional response active. What response? Exorthale growled. A subroutine flickered open, then shut itself down. The ship lurched again, harder this time. A low-frequency tone rolled through the hull, too deep to hear properly, felt more than heard. Report! Exorthale roared. Long-range sensors picking up transient echoes, the navigation officer said. False positives, maybe. But they're consistent. Consistent with what? The officer hesitated. With observation. Exorthale's eyes narrowed. From where? Before an answer came, the ship's clock desynced by precisely 3 seconds. That had never happened before. In the holding pen, Mara closed her eyes. Somewhere beyond the stars, something had acknowledged the signal, not with urgency, not with alarm, but with certainty. The slavers had not been discovered. They had been logged. And on the Carthax chain, the quiet was no longer empty. The first human signal did not announce itself. It arrived as a checksum failure buried deep inside a monitoring lattice that hadn't been manually accessed in decades. No alarms sounded. No officers were summoned. The system simply paused, verified, and shifted status from passive to confirmed. On the far edge of human-controlled space, a relay station adjusted its orientation by less than a degree. Back aboard the Carthax chain, Overseer Exorthale felt the ship's mood change. He stood on the command deck, talons clasped behind his back, watching his crew work with brittle focus. Displays flickered with data that refused to settle. The vessel was no longer behaving like property. It was responding to something unseen. Repeat the sensor sweep, he ordered. We have, the navigation officer replied. Multiple times. And? And the readings are empty, the officer said carefully. No mass signatures. No energy spikes. But the echoes persist. Exorthale turned slowly. You're telling me we're seeing ghosts? I'm telling you, the officer said, that something is pacing us without occupying space. That earned a low murmur from the deck. Exorthale slammed a claw against the console. Enough superstition. If there's a shadow, it has a source. Find it. Below them, in the holding sector, Mara sensed the moment fear crossed the threshold. The guards no longer lingered. They passed the pens quickly now, weapons held tighter, eyes darting to corners where nothing waited. The air carried tension, sharp and metallic, like a storm about to break. A woman beside Mara whispered, "They won't look at you anymore." Mara opened her eyes. "They don't need to." "What does that mean?" the woman asked. Mara didn't answer. She was listening to the ship, its rhythm, its pulse. The hum had changed again. Deeper. Slower. Like something massive matching pace alongside. Footsteps approached. Heavy. Deliberate. Exorthale stopped before her pen, alone this time. "You will speak," he said, his voice low. "Now." Mara stood. The energy bars shimmered inches from her skin. "You've already run my name," she said. "You wouldn't be here if you hadn't." Exorthale's mandibles tightened. "Your designation triggered dormant human protocols." "Explain them." "They're not dormant," Mara replied. "They're waiting." "For what?" "For confirmation." Exorthale leaned closer. "Confirmation of what?" "That a line has been crossed." He stared at her, searching for deception, hysteria, bravado. He found none. "You are a civilian," he said. "Unarmed. Unimportant." Mara met his gaze. "I am ordinary. That's the point." She lifted her chin slightly. "Humans learned early that power invites challenge. So we stopped advertising it." "Then why your name?" he demanded. "Why market at all?" "Because deterrence only works if someone remembers," she said. "Some families exist to be remembered." Exorthale stepped back, unsettled despite himself. "You expect me to believe an entire species bends around bloodlines?" "No," Mara said. "Around consequences." The ship shuddered. Not violently. Precisely. A tone pulsed through the hull, measured and unmistakably intentional. "Overseer," a voice crackled over the intercom. "Long-range sensors have resolved." Exorthale turned sharply. "Resolved into what?" "Contacts." "How many?" A pause. "Indeterminate. They're not approaching. They're already where they need to be." The command deck fell silent. External displays bloomed to life. Space was still empty, no glowing drives, no silhouettes. Yet targeting systems began autolocking, chasing vectors that refused to stabilize. "Identify!" Exorthale roared. No response came. Then a channel opened. It wasn't a hail. It wasn't even audio. Just a data packet, clean and unencrypted, injected directly into the ship's core systems. A single line of text appeared across every screen. Confirmation received. The jump drive disengaged with a shriek of tortured metal. "What have you done?" Exorthale snarled, spinning back toward Mara. She shook her head. "I didn't do anything." "Liar!" "You did," she said quietly. "When you logged my name. When you ignored the warning. When you decided profit mattered more than memory." On the command deck, panic erupted. "Power fluctuations across all systems. Weapons aren't responding. External fields are collapsing in sequence. This is coordinated." Exorthale felt something cold settle in his chest. "Open comms!" he barked. "All channels. Union, mercantile, anyone." No signal escaped. Instead, a voice filled the deck, not loud, not distorted. "Human. Calm. Close. This is a notice," it said. "Not a negotiation." Exorthale froze. "We have identified your vessel, crew, An operational history. The voice continued. Your cargo includes protected civilians. That condition has been met. A pause. Remain still. Mara closed her eyes. In the holding sector, the energy bars dropped. Not explosively. Gently. Like a door being unlocked by someone who already had the key. The captives stared in disbelief as gravity steadied, lights normalized, and the oppressive hum receded. A human voice echoed through the corridor speakers now, clearer here. Civilians, you are safe. Follow guidance lights when they appear. Blue indicators ignited along the floor. Exorthale staggered back, his authority evaporating in seconds. You cannot do this. He snarled at the empty air. This ship is sovereign. The voice replied. It was. Past tense. Mara stepped out of the pen, rubbing her wrists. A guard dropped his weapon and fled. Another sank to his knees. Exorthale watched her cross the deck toward him, unarmed, unhurried. What are you? He whispered. She stopped a few steps away. Someone whose people don't issue warnings twice. Behind her, space itself seemed to bend, outlines finally emerging, sleek human vessels fading into visibility, weapons cold, precise, and overwhelming. The galaxy had not come to save a girl. It had come to close a file. And the Carthax chain was already marked complete. The fighting lasted 4 minutes. Not because the slavers resisted well, but because humans were thorough. The first human boarding team did not storm the Carthax chain. There were no shouted commands, no dramatic breaches. Sections of the hull simply went inert, sealed and isolated with surgical precision. Life support shifted to auxiliary control under external command. Weapon systems powered down one by one, each shut down timed to prevent cascading failure. Exorthale felt the ship die beneath his feet. Override! He roared, striking the command console with enough force to crack the casing. Manual control! Any control! Nothing responded. Around him, his crew scattered in chaos. Some fled toward escape pods that refused to open. Others fired blindly at bulkheads, their shots absorbed without effect. A few dropped their weapons entirely, sinking to the deck as the weight of inevitability crushed whatever courage remained. The human voice returned, closer now, resonating through the ship's internal channels. Overseer Exorthale, it said, pronouncing his name perfectly. Remain where you are. Mara stood near the center of the command deck, watching the collapse with a distant calm. Blue guidance lights traced a clear path behind her toward the exits. Freed captives were already moving, escorted by unseen coordination, confusion slowly giving way to relief. Exorthale turned toward her, eyes wild. Call them off, he demanded. You started this. End it. Mara shook her head. That's not how it works. You said this was obligation, he hissed. Then fulfill it. Spare us. She met his gaze without hatred. The obligation isn't to you. A section of the deck iris opened soundlessly. 3 human figures stepped through, armored in matte black, faces hidden behind opaque visors. Their weapons remained lowered. The one in the center spoke. Mara Hale. She nodded. That's me. You're clear to disembark. Exorthale laughed, a harsh, broken sound. You see? He spat. She walks free. We negotiate. The human commander didn't look at him. She was never detained under this operation. Mara hesitated, then glanced back at Exorthale. For the first time, something like sadness crossed her face. You could have stopped, she said. When the system warned you. I am a slaver, he snarled. Fear is my currency. And memory is ours, she replied. She turned and followed the soldiers out. The corridor beyond the command deck had been transformed. Where once it reeked of rust and confinement, it now glowed with steady light. Medical drones hovered near the captives, scanning, soothing, guiding. No one was rushed. No one was shouted at. A child clung to Mara's hand without realizing it. She squeezed gently and kept walking. They boarded a human transport docked seamlessly against the slaver hull. The interior was warm, quiet, and unmistakably human, functional without menace. As the hatch sealed behind them, a subtle vibration passed through the deck. Mara paused. What happens to them? The commander considered her for a moment. Their records have been transmitted to every enforcement network that still functions. Their assets are frozen. Their operations are terminated. And the people? They'll be processed, he said. No spectacle. No stories. She nodded. That was enough. From the viewport, she watched as the Carthax chain was pulled apart, not violently, but decisively. Sections separated and folded inward under controlled force. Data cores were extracted. Cargo holds opened. Evidence flowed outward in encrypted streams. Exorthale remained on the command deck until the end. He was still there when the final lock disengaged, when the last system went dark. He did not scream. There was no one left to hear him. Hours later, the human ships were gone. The space where the slaver vessel had existed was empty, scrubbed clean down to background radiation. To an untrained eye, it would seem nothing had happened. Across the outer trade routes, whispers spread anyway. Slave auctions failed to initialize. Black market brokers found accounts sealed without explanation. Ships altered course without knowing why, instinctively avoiding certain sectors. Names were checked more carefully. Manifests revised. Human captives quietly released at the first hint of complication. No announcements were made. On a small frontier world weeks later, Mara stepped off a transport and into thin sunlight. The air smelled of dust and metal. Home. Her father waited near the landing pad, hands clasped behind his back, expression unreadable until he saw her. Then his shoulders eased. You're late, he said. Ran into traffic, she replied. They stood there a moment, the noise of the port flowing around them. I heard, he said quietly. She nodded. They logged the name. He exhaled once. I hoped they wouldn't. So did I. They walked together toward the city. No crowds gathered. No one pointed. To the world, she was just another civilian returning from work gone wrong. Did it hurt? He asked. She thought of the ship, the fear, the moment space itself had seemed to lean toward her. Not the way they expected. He smiled faintly. Good. That night, far beyond her home, a new entry circulated through quiet networks older than most governments. A single line, stripped of emotion. Incident closed. Response effective. Somewhere, a slaver captain erased a human name from a manifest and chose a different cargo. Somewhere else, an officer paused when a registry flagged a surname and decided not to override the warning. And across the galaxy, without speeches or banners, one truth settled into collective memory. Humans did not need to threaten. They only needed to be remembered.